Okay, today I'm going to do something a little bit different. Just for some fun, we're going to have a cutting contest. This is going to be a single-edged special, so we're only going to be using single-edged swords instead of double-edged swords. And in addition to that, it's going to be all on theme. We are going to be using two-handed, single-edged swords, and they're all going to be Chinese. Compliments of swordmaker LK Chen. We have a variety of two-handed swords from across China's history, starting with the Zhanmadao from the Song Dynasty, so starting in around the 10th century up to the 13th century. Then we have two Ming-style sabers. We have the Crossbowman Dao, and then the Imperial Guard Chung Dao. And then going all the way into the Republic area, we have the longer Miaodao and the sprout bladed saber, and then the very famous Dadao, or big saber, also called the Changdao. I'm not going to be going into a lot of detail as to the history of each of these swords. We might talk about it a little bit as we go through them, but we'll save that for dedicated reviews for each of the individual ones. I'll just be comparing them. We'll do a quick cutting test, maybe one or two different cutting tests on each sword. And rather than compare them to each other, I'll compare their handling characteristics to a stick. I just have a handy martial arts bakudo, boken, and we'll swing this around, and then we'll compare how each of the other swords compares to this as a kind of baseline sword to give you guys some idea of how each of them handles. So, let's see how they cut. First up, Song Zhanmadao. Horse cleaving saber. I was actually a little surprised that it went through so cleanly. Sometimes it bats away larger targets, but this time it went through very nicely. Perhaps my technique is getting better. So compared to a bokudo, this a very heavy blade. It's nimble compared to perhaps a pole arm, but even though it's got more blade than handle, it still balances so far out, and it's got so much mass, it's 2.5 kilograms altogether, that it requires a lot of strength and commitment to each swing. Next up is the Ming Crossbowman Dao, one of two Dao or Changdao, and on first glance, everyone's tempted to say that looks like a katana, it looks like a Japanese sword. And we'll talk about the history of it and why it looks like that in the future. But you can see it's next to a more standard size Japanese sword. It is quite a bit bigger compared to the usual practice or standard kind of 22, 28-inch blades. So, still a big sword. Okay, so compared to the bokuto, this is quite a bit heavier. It obviously carries more blade presence. It's got a longer grip, so that offsets it a little bit, but you can still manipulate it rather easily. And as you can see, it cuts very, very well. All of these swords from LK Chen have spectacular edge geometry. So I don't expect any of them to do a bad job cutting. The only one that I doubted was the Song Zhanmadao, and that's just because of the mass. So it's difficult to accelerate it against a very light target like these bottles. But even that was able to go right through. So very nice sword. I enjoy it. Also from the Ming Dynasty, Changdao, or the large sword. So this is the longest of any of the swords we're going to be testing today. And even though it's longer than the Crossbowman Dao, and obviously it's heavier, because of the long grip and because of the way that it distally tapers, it does not feel very cumbersome. It doesn't feel anything as heavy to wield as the Song Zhanmadao, which was much shorter. I don't remember the weight of this one offhand. It's definitely not quite as heavy, but it feels a lot easier to maneuver offhand. Let's see what the edge geometry is like. That was my fault for flubbing it, but you can see it still made a very clean cut. We'll see if I can get another one even on a light target. This blade is really, really nice. It maneuvers super easily, super well. It cuts like a laser. That was my fault on the cut, but it handles very, very nicely. You can almost maneuver it with one hand. If I did a little bit more strength training, you could probably wield it with a single hand, even at this tremendous length. But because you have so much leverage, being able to manipulate the tip with such a keen edge at such a far distance just makes for tremendously fearsome cuts. Great sword. Next up is a sword I've never cut with. This is the Republic era Miaodao, and you can see that it bears similarities to the Ming era saber we were just looking at. Again, a story for a different time explaining why it is what it is and how those similarities came to the design of this much later period sword. It's lighter, it's a little bit shorter, and it's much closer in handling characteristics to the Bakuto. Yeah, this one's going to be fun to cut with. Let's see what it looks like. Very easy cutter. So something different about this sword than the other ones we've looked at is it has a pipe back blade, or a T-spine. Not really a T-spine blade, but it's got a hollow ground primary blade and then a pipe black reinforced edge. So that it makes it easy to initially bite, but as it passes through, that depending on the type of target, that might make it difficult to transition through the whole target. No problem on a light target like this. Cuts very easily. The light blade, very easy to accelerate it all the way through the cuts. Very fun sword to cut with. Now, on the complete opposite end of saber design, we have a short, wide bladed saber. This is again from the Republic period, although they made examples like this in the late Qing as well. This is called a Dadao, sometimes called a Changdao, and it just means big saber. And compared to the Bokuto, it's much slower. There's a lot of mass, there's a lot of weight out in the end. It's got a longer, heavier grip, so the whole thing feels a little slow in the hand compared to this lighter stick. It obviously can cut with a lot of authority. It's a one-handed weapon. Can be done, but it would be quite a workout. See how it does in two hands. Cuts very well. So the big deep blade, the beautiful kind of it's not quite wedge shape, it curves a little bit, so it's half a lenticular shaped cross section, allow it to make fearsome cuts against even a light target. So no batting away like a baseball bat for this type of a sword design. We're going to try one more cutting test to measure penetration ability. I usually do not cut cardboard because it can start to dull the blade, but just one time will be okay, and I don't have a lot of heavy targets to test on right now. I don't have any tatami, my bamboo hasn't grown back yet, so I have a big cardboard box. Let's just see what each of the swords does with a single strike. Starting with the Song Zhanmadao. Did not cut. Let's see if that's a sign of things to come. Crossbowman Dao. Crossbowman Dao goes 50% of the way through. Imperial Guard Changdao. I almost hit the ground. The Changdao is a very powerful sword, and it cuts significantly into the cardboard box. Do not doubt the power of the Changdao. Miaodao. My box has lost integrity. Let me switch boxes. All right. Whacked, but did not go through. Dadao. It crumpled, but it also cut. This time it cut maybe, I'm gonna say a third of the way through, maybe a quarter. So probably 12 inches. So there you go. Let's have a quick discussion about that. The two that obviously were most interesting about their failures were the Zhanmadao and the Miaodao. I think they failed for different reasons. I think that the Zhanmadao failed probably because I wasn't able to accelerate it fast enough. And so when it hit, a combination between the keenness of the edge, it's a little bit more of a wedge shape than a narrower blade than the other ones, and the fact that it was moving a little bit slower made it so that it wasn't able to bite into the cardboard, and it caused it to deform. And you'll notice it did deform tremendously. Like, it got hit with a huge amount of force and the cardboard deformed. The Miaodao failed, and that's possibly because it is a lighter weapon and it doesn't have enough mass at the tip to be able to go after a heavy target like that. I also hit it right here on the tape, so maybe that wasn't a fair assessment. As soon as we're done here, I will try one more hit with the Miaodao just to give it a fair shake. The Dadao, obviously sharp edge, able to go through, but not as much leverage perhaps as the Crossbowman Dao. So it didn't go down as far, even with a wide, heavy blade. Crossbowman Dao goes down further, and the Changdao, what can I say? It's a very long, sharp blade on a huge lever. Obviously, it wins this particular contest. Let me go get the Miaodao for one last cut, see if it's any different. Okay, fresh end of the box. This time, not cutting on the tape. Miaodao, last chance for redemption. Aha! This is the problem with only having one trial each. So you can see this time the Miaodao was able to bite, and again it's being braced over here, so perhaps that's giving it a leg up. And it went down pretty far, not as far as Changdao, but further than the Crossbowman Dao. So it's done pretty well because it's got a lot of leverage in the blade. So perhaps sometimes it needs a little bit of help in order to bite, and perhaps tape is better armor than you might think. Plastic offers good protection. If knights had it back in the day, they'd be using plastic instead of metal to prevent arrows and spears and knives and swords and everything from gaining purchase and being able to bite on their surface, because it's light and it's smooth and it's effective. So keep that in mind. Anyway, here was a fun test. You have a whole bunch of different solutions or different answers to different problems. So you have different types of sabers. All of them are a lot of fun and a lot of very high quality. So depending on what you're interested in, go out there and investigate a new sword. Take care.